Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and welcome back to this YouTube channel about narcissism. So here's a question I get a lot. Is there a way to talk with children about narcissism? Let's take that on. Those of you who might be co-parenting with a narcissistic person, or maybe you have a narcissistic parent who's a grandparent to your child, may wonder, how do I talk to my kids about this? So again, it's a question that comes up all the time. And it's typically most often from people who may be watching their children struggle with managing a narcissistic parent and getting more anxious, and the child's getting more anxious. And this, again, is going to be much more pronounced if you're going through divorce or splitting up, or you're already split up. And you want to be sure that you never confuse your child further by saying bad things about a parent or anyone else in their lives. Again, it may not necessarily be that their other parent is the narcissistic person. It may be a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle, some sibling of either parent, or some other extended family member. So, is there a way to have this conversation with a child? Now, clearly some of this is developmental. Children are not a uniform entity. There are young children, like kids might call it under 7. There are elementary school age kids, maybe between 7 and 12. There's the middle schoolers, there's the adolescents. And the ways of framing this and having these conversations and supporting children, a lot of it is going to come down to where they are at developmentally. So let's talk about the little kids first, because there's no real talking about it with the little kids as much as really at that stage. It's about protecting the child. You want to keep them away from confusing rhetoric, manipulative comparisons that a narcissistic person may be making, all of the stuff that you may have grown up with, right? At this age, the harder work is for the parent who's trying to protect the child. Because, for example, a child may adore a narcissistic grandparent who plays games with them or does stuff with them or buys them stuff. And it's you that is watching the usual nonsense play out. When possible, don't rely on a narcissistic family member for childcare. I know childcare is expensive, but the interest you're paying on it when you rely on a family member is astronomical. Try and avoid the child spending time alone with the narcissistic family member if you are worried about what they will say. If a small child does seem anxious about being with a narcissistic family member, honor that and cancel the plans. Be there the whole time. And as a parent, if you do have narcissistic family members, the key is that you foster an environment for your children at home of safety, empathy, compassion, mutuality, and allowing them to be their true selves. If it's a younger child and we're talking about a co-parent who's narcissistic, again, you're not going to sort of hit them headlong with this. You are going to create the smoothest space you can from them. And it's obviously going to vary on whether or not you're living with their narcissistic co-parent, you're still in a relationship with them, or you're living in separate households. It can be, both of those can be obviously very taxing. In one case because you're still in the relationship, in another because you want to make sure your child's okay, even though you're not with them all the time. But at this stage, what you might see in a child is maybe some anxiety, some agitation. You might also see that they're quite content with their narcissistic parent, but might be picking up some bad habits. They may not be brushing their teeth at night, and some of the routines are gone. Sometimes you got to choose your battles and ensure that you maintain those routines in your household. Because it could very well be that getting into it with the narcissistic co-parent is just going to mean that they double down on being more lax. So it's choose the battles so as to not increase the tension for your child. Recognize that in your household you're going to run by a certain set of rules, but at this young age there's no way to talk about it. If the child is expressing some distaste or concern about that parent, you can hear it. You might even want to consider mental health services for your child, but this is definitely not a place where you want to talk to them and say, well, yeah, I know mommy's a narcissist, so never, ever, never, ever do you want to go there. As the child gets a little older and gets through elementary school, some children may actually have an inkling that someone in their midst isn't healthy, especially if it's a loud and mean narcissistic person in the family. It could be their parent, could be someone else. or if you or the child's other parent is affected by the narcissistic behavior of this family member. Now listen, you're never going to say, oh, grandma's just really narcissistic. Don't let her gaslight you. But instead, it's all the same stuff as with younger children. Avoiding too much time alone with any other family member that may be narcissistic, especially if the child's not enjoying it. However, you also don't want to get into the mud with your own narcissistic parent. Just gently guide yourselves out of there if that narcissistic family member is acting up. A child at this age may notice your change in mood when you're around any narcissistic family member or partner or co-parent. And again, this is not the time to tell the child, oh, Auntie Anne is really narcissistic and she absolutely leaves me depleted. But you also don't need to excuse Auntie Anne's behavior. You certainly could take a stance of, grown-ups are complicated and sometimes not nice to each other, and it can hurt our feelings. So you're not putting the onus squarely on Auntie Anne, but also acknowledging something uncomfortable is happening. And definitely let the child know none of this is happening because of them. Children have a tendency to blame themselves for any ruptures in any systems. But you don't want to get into a conversation with the child about how mean any narcissistic person is, whether it's a co-parent, whether it's another family member. Now, as you come up into middle school and adolescence, your children are starting to develop their own instincts, intuitions, knowledge, and may be able to hold their own a little bit more, but they're still kids and you have to give them permission to do so. At all ages, you must remember to never gaslight your children. If a narcissistic family member is behaving in a manner that is out of line, it can't be, oh, grandpa doesn't mean it when he's saying those things. He just comes from a different time and it's okay. It's not okay. And it really confuses your children when you do something like that. You also don't ever want to tell your kids, oh, grandpa isn't that bad. You just have to respect him, especially if he's been behaving really badly or manipulatively or in an invalidating way. When your children hear or witness or experience something toxic with your narcissistic family members, check in with them. Ask them how they're feeling or if they want to talk. You still probably aren't going to use the narcissism word, but now you can expand vocabulary into, yeah, that behavior you just saw, that wasn't very healthy, or yeah, I noticed that she wasn't being very empathic or kind. As much as possible, stay focused on behavior. Your children may be curious about how you or their other parent is coping or how you feel. Be open. You don't have to go into a dissertation about how you lost your entire sense of self because of this parent, but you can say, I feel hurt. It doesn't feel good. And then you want to reinforce your child's empathy. If they show it, if they check in with you and say, thanks for checking in, it means a lot. So that begs another question. What if your child approaches you and says, is mom or dad or Nana or Uncle Al or someone else narcissistic? They might say, you know what, I just watched this TikTok and what this person was saying is just like them. A safer place to say, what did you learn that made you think that? And then let them tell you. Then, if they are convinced, you can say, yeah, that seems to fit, or something like that. And then that can be a jumping off place to your child feeling that they can disengage a bit and aren't given the often dysfunctional family screed of, well, they're family, so we shouldn't say anything. You may want to tell your teenager, oh, I don't think you should call Auntie Anne out about her narcissism. Nothing good can come of that. Or just simply say, maybe don't call Auntie Anne out. But you never want to gaslight your child. Remember that. It is okay to acknowledge that they witnessed something that was uncomfortable. There is no easy way to have conversations about toxic people of any kind, not just family, but any, with children. And the net result of that is that we simply do not have tools to approach these conversations and situations, which leaves children confused, self-blaming, worried about their parents. And it's worse, though, when children are told, oh, you must always respect your elders, or that it is forbidden to harbor bad feelings about family. That's when people start blaming themselves. These kinds of conversations, done subtly and in a nuanced way, about unhealthy relationships, can be a really important space to teach children to trust their instincts, set boundaries, not blame themselves, and learn skills that may work well for them as they get older. A lot of this gets significantly more complicated when we're talking about a narcissistic co-parent. This is their own parent, and you have to be much more careful because there may be very different kinds of emotions that are brought up for you. Again, you're going to let them guide the conversation. They may share with you a pattern that makes them uncomfortable. You're never going to say to your kids that, yeah, whoever parent it is narcissistic. But you're going to move in there carefully, and when they say this is not healthy, this is not okay, let them talk about it. Let them vent. The more it seems like a place that they can talk openly, and less of a place where you're going to shut them down and say, yep, I told you so, it might give your children a chance to breathe, to trust their instincts. Like I said, I don't think that there's an easy way to have these conversations, but that doesn't mean we shut our children down when they're sharing their feelings about relationships that feel interpersonally unhealthy and uncomfortable. Thanks again.